I'm not hearing anybody. Have you started the meeting?
Hi, Barbara. We have not started the meeting. Good morning, everybody. We are just getting a few things set up while we wait for a couple of the more participants to join in, and we'll be starting in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Tamu, good morning. This will get started. Just want to start this morning with a blessing. So, Tamu, Ohuahiwa Dipovi, Ne Otewa Hawe, Ne Hapo Winge Omu, Ne Ke Atoa Omu. My name is Beata Sosi. I'm a Pueblo representative with the task force. And I'll just say a blessing in the Tewa language. Mbiak Gindi. Jia in tara in ko'o in ki'i ka je matu in dasedo jia kwejo sedovie kwejovie posa jemu. Kunta wahane ta'agi. Wia wita dimegi. Yege nang hiwo riansha rinko. Heranho ne'ita hiwo gimpundi. Di ngayin nami na vitoa dije anda ovehe hahami. Na vitoa in wawatsi he ove mani. Kunta nambi wawatsi hagi. Pingpie, tampie, kumpie, tampie, makoa, nansogenuge. Eye hera opa are wepi pingnang hatung oveto. Ambang tunajo angin poet simaye. Pare iweribo. Te kiribo ivisigi ami. Hera viagi nami. Hera vihege ami heranho. Ne hapo owinge. Ne nano chukwejo. Hiwo ginpundi. Kundawaha. So I just asked for our ancestors to be with us. Gave thanks for this day, that all the blessings of life come to us. Ask for healing for those in our families who are sick, that we remember that we're granted teachings from the sacred cosmic directions to be with us as we go about our life and work, that we remember the original instructions given to humankind since the beginning, to love, respect, and take care of one another, so things will go good for us here on our Earth Mother, and that for all the children of the world to be united with one heart. So, kundawaha. I'll turn it over to Maddie Jim. Or no, I'm
So is it me then, or are you doing an update on the task force activities?
I'll go ahead. Hinamopuyu Karimba, the Daikam Tepoe, the Kamlin Trujillo, Makwam. I just want to welcome everybody. Good morning. My name is Lynn Trujillo. I'm very honored to be here. I am the Cabinet Secretary for the Indian Affairs Department. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I especially want to thank Beata Sosi for her organization of this public meeting, as well as Stephanie Salazar, who spearheads the efforts for the Indian Affairs Department on MMIW. She serves as our general counsel, is on the WebEx today. Before we begin, I wanted to provide just a brief update. Stephanie, is that the way that we're proceeding in the agenda? To many of you who are joining us, just on some of the work that the task force has been engaged in. So I don't know if we have slides available or if you just want me to talk to the... For those of you who don't know me, in addition to being the Cabinet Secretary at the Indian Affairs Department, I'm from the Pueblo of an enrolled member at Sandia Pueblo. I'm also part Taos and Acoma Pueblos. So I serve as the chair for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives Task Force. The next slide, please. Just to give you some background, the task force was formed last year through the passage of House Bill 278, and the objective of our task force was manifold, but really to study and report on the crisis of MMIW in New Mexico. Our task force is comprised of a number of representatives from our tribal communities in the state, including representatives from Pueblo Nations, the Navajo Nation, Jicarilla, and Mescalero Apache Nations. We also have representatives that provide direct services, including counseling, medical, and legal services to victims of crime and survivors of violence, as well as governmental representatives at the state and federal levels. And we also have a courageous survivor of violence that continues to ground our discussions and our work as a task force. The legislation mandated that we deliver a report to the legislature and the governor before November 1st of this year, and that's what we've been working on. Next slide, please. And I want to thank everybody for their patience as we move through complete activities, as we move through the virtual landscape of having these convenings. Wanted to share with you all just a couple of completed activities that the task force has been working on. We really hit the ground running since the appointment of the task force in October. Since then, the task force has held 5 public meetings, and we've had a number of closed working sessions. The public meetings have been very successful, and we're very thankful to the many community members and experts and stakeholders who shared their ideas and suggestions and expertise with the task force, and that continue to help ground us as we continue to work on the task force. The task force also had developed 2 subcommittees, which really helped to move data collection efforts forward. There was a stakeholder advisory committee, which was really instrumental in supporting the task force to make important decisions about how to go about collecting data in a respectful manner, especially when it came to very sensitive topics. We had data requests that were submitted to law enforcement agencies throughout the state, really focusing on those areas that had significant American, Indian, and Alaska Native populations based on data from the 2010 census. And we submitted IPRA requests, so it's an information for public request, to 22 law enforcement state agencies so that we can collect data on the aggregate counts of solved and unsolved missing person cases, as well as solved and unsolved homicides and solved and unsolved suspicious deaths. So to date, 5 agencies have not responded to the task force request. We continue to gather information. We've also been able to establish really good relationships with NAMUS and NCMEC, and we really hope to, in the coming months, to host educational webinars for the public. Next slide, please. A couple of activities that the task force has in progress. The task force has come up with a survey tool that is ready for distribution to tribal law enforcement agencies and victim service providers. These surveys are really important because we want to give individuals who work on the ground within our tribal communities the opportunity to provide feedback to the task force so that we can better understand what the barriers are to reporting, as well as other procedural questions, including access to training. We continue to collect data that has been returned through the IPRA request. This data is being prepared for analysis. We work with our partners at the University of New Mexico, the Native American Budget Policy Institute, who will help add to the report that the task force will be producing. We also have a really great partnership with student attorneys at the University of New Mexico, the school's Southwest Indian Law Clinic. They're supporting the task force by drafting a section of our report that will focus on tribal criminal jurisdiction and the barriers that exist to provide context to the report. Next slide, please. We wanted to share with you a little bit about our data collection initiatives. We continue to move these efforts forward in spite of where we're all at in the pandemic. We have recently received support from our All Public Council of Governors that passed a resolution supporting the data collection initiatives of the task force. We have also drafted data sharing agreements, and these are pending approval from the All Public Council of Governors. These agreements are between the state and tribal nations, and they outline the process for survey distribution in our tribal communities. The agreements will need to be signed by tribal leaders and will serve as providing permission to allow the task force to survey law enforcement and victim service providers. So we'll get those executed prior to any data collection within our tribal communities. Finally, our task force is working very hard to draft a memorandum that will outline the findings and recommendations of the task force. This will be followed by a formal report to be shared with all interested parties by late November. And while the pandemic has impacted the ability of the task force to hold in-person meetings and to collect certain data, we continue to meet with experts in the community and gather information that will be compiled in the final report. Next slide, please. Just a couple of things that we wanted to share with you as we continue to compile our findings and recommendations. Through the work, we found that really there's a need for community members need support and resources to navigate systems, to find missing relatives. In addition, there is a need to increase community engagement in the response to missing persons. and finally, a need to improve services for trauma and healing for families and survivors. And so, today's discussion, I'm very thankful for all of you who are here and those who are going to be contributing to the discussion, as this will greatly inform this area and perspective in terms of the needs of youth and the LGBTQ community, which must be acknowledged and included in the work that we're doing as a task force. Next slide, please. This last slide here just provides you all with a couple of upcoming deadlines that the task force is working to meet. And with that, I want to thank you all for all the attendees that are here, as well as our task force members. And I look forward to being with you today to hear your perspectives and to learn more from you. Herkim.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. Hi, everyone. This is Maddie. Maddie Jim and Kia Ani So I currently work as a supervisor for HIV prevention programs at First Nations Community Health Source. And then also I am a transgender advocate. I identify as a Native transgender woman. And I was recently contacted by Beata, and I wanted to thank Beata for all the conversations and phone calls we had back and forth in doing this segment. And I was reached out to, and I had accepted after a few conversations of what was needed within this public meeting. So at first I was kind of confused about meeting, panel, this, that, what was being asked for. So we kind of like hashed it out. And the whole context of this meeting was narrowed down into working with youth, Native youth communities, and also Native LGBTQ Two-Spirit communities. And around like different issues, different challenges within our communities. And during the conversations, I had expressed to Beata that a lot of times these are the two populations that are very, very underserved and not at the table when we do work. And then also that our populations are not included in some of the stuff that we do or being at the table unless we ask for it or we fight for it. So I'm really happy that the task force is doing this for the community, and I was asked to be the moderator. So I want to first say a disclaimer that I'm not youth, as you can see. I might have been youth like 3 generations ago, but because of time restraints, we realized that we had to get a moderator and we had to do this. And in our conversations, we realized that this should have been 2 separate meetings. So one to really focus on Native youth from a youth perspective, and having a youth moderate the panel or the meeting, then also having a separate one for Native LGBTQ Two-Spirit communities, and having them be also in another meeting as to where they could address some of their issues in detail, and also inviting some of their peers or invite others to discuss some of the challenges and issues, or even recommendations to leaders in our communities of what is needed within our communities, especially tribal communities. A lot of times we see that the populations that are being served, especially for Native LGBTQ populations, that there is little data in tribal communities, or that there are chairs at the table for them to be at. So always advocating, and I'm really happy that there are a handful of LGBTQ community members who are pushing to be at the table or recommend people to be at the table. And then also for youth, for me, like I'm an adult, like I said, 3 generations before. So what I did as a youth is totally different than what the youth perspective is now. So at times when I hear people talking about youth communities, we tend to kind of give information of what we were as youth and try to implement it within the community. So not really getting the voice of the youth community. So I think that would be like my recommendation, and maybe we could add that, and I'm sure people are going to hear it, is having youth at the table. So with this whole discussion that we had and the way we were planning it, I had agreed to do this meeting and moderate it and talking about some of these challenges. So the meeting, the panels are going to be two. The first section, we're going to be talking about Native youth panel meeting. We're going to have a presentation panel type of discussion. So some of them have slides which they're going to show and talk about their slides and talk about some of the challenges with being from the youth community, and then also try to do this intersectionality and go into the next session, which is going to be the panel 2, which is going to be Native LGBTQ youth. And in the second panel, we're going to be talking about culture, keeping tradition. Did I get muted?
There you go.
So I don't know if when I got muted, did I just get muted a while ago?
Just a second ago.
Oh, okay. Okay, so coming from a cultural context, we're gonna get some information from a couple of the presenters. We're gonna have also Renee Gray, who I know personally, who has done great work within the community. So she will also give great information and context to what we're gonna be talking about within the community. And we've had discussions before about MMIW and context. So hopefully that comes up also in the second panel that we discussed stuff. So I'm very grateful that I'm here to talk about some of the challenges within these two communities. And I strongly advocate for youth also to be at the table, to have a voice. And whenever we're working with youth, to have them be at the table to speak also too. So with that, I believe we are going to get along into the panel. Some housekeeping stuff. So we asked people for their bios, and some of them were pretty long. So because of time issues, we decided we were going to put them in the chat box. So if you want to read the bios on people like mine, it's in the chat box, and it gives my bio of the work that I've done, my clans and stuff. So you can read that. So each time the presenter is going to present, their bio is going to be posted in the chat room, so you could read about them and what they've done within their communities, and a little bit more, learn a little bit more about them within their bios. And then also another thing is, if you're using a phone, I believe the mute and unmute button is *6, right? Yes. So *6. So just some housekeeping stuff, logistics. This is my first time using this WebEx, so I'm kind of liking it because I'm used to Zoom and doing Zoom. So other than that, what else is there? I think that's it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And our first presenter, I want to introduce Jalen Little Bear with the Pueblo Action Alliance intern. And for the presenters, if you could say your name, where you're from, your clans if you want to, where you work or what you like to do, and also your pronouns. I feel that pronouns would be important because sometimes we have different pronouns other than she and her. We may have they, them pronouns. So if you want to state your pronouns too, so that way we get the pronouns right. So I'll turn it over to Jalen. Jalen, are you unmuted?
Hello, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Good morning. My name is Jalen Littleton.
Jalen, before you get started, I wanted to say something else also. I'm sorry. So when we were doing a meeting and a follow-up and checkup, we had asked the task force like some of the stuff that they wanted to also possibly get out of this panel discussions with youth and Native LGBTQ communities. And there was a long list of questions. So what we decided to do was send it out to the presenters and have them pick some of the questions that they wanted to address within these questions. So I'll quickly read off on the list as fast as I can, like some of the stuff, so that way the participants kind of know what the questions were and kind of fit it into some of the presentations that are being done, okay? So bear with me for a minute or two. So these are some of the questions that were comprised. What can we recommend to our governor and legislature immediately so that violence can be reported or services be made more accessible? What are the barriers that exist? How can these groups, youth and LGBTQ2S, safely access law enforcement and victim services? Where do you go for support and services now? If you could have the best services, what would that look like? What are barriers from tribal governments? What would you like to see your tribal governments and councils implement immediately? Do you face discrimination or fear retaliation in approaching these issues within your community? What support services and resources do you want to see in tribal communities? What are the issues of tribal communities? Examples: government structure, heteropatriarchy, prejudice and discrimination, lack of crisis support, safety concerns. What gaps exist in data gathering and the report that you are aware of? What do you recommend for addressing ignorance, discriminatory policies, and community education on ensuring equity in tribal and other communities of youth, and also for LGBTQ Two-Spirit communities? How can we start to have the hard conversations within tribal communities about heteropatriarchy that has been assimilated into our way of life through colonial violence and forced assimilation? How are tribal community members marginalized and put at risk with ageism and transphobia and homophobia? What are issues around safety that you face in your community? What are your strengths? So those are some of the questions that were developed, and I know it's a long list, and with panels, it's best to do like 2 or 3. So we just decided to send them out to the presenters and have them pick which ones they wanted to address and utilize also too. And there could also be a crossover in these questions with youth and native LGBTQ Two-Spirit communities if they identify in both sectors. So sorry to cut you off, Jalen, and I will turn it back to you. Take it away.
Good morning. My name is Jayla Motober. My pronouns are she, her. I am from the Pueblo of Santa Ana. I am a youth intern with Pueblo Action Alliance. A little bit before I go into like my poem, I was 13 when I was bisexual. I was 15 when I experienced. So a lot of men decided that just because I did like 2 genders, it was like an easy access for me, and I guess that really took a toll on me throughout the years. But now that I am mentally better, I feel that like even if you're at a young age and you come out, it is okay. Like just don't let anyone hurt you or harm you. Especially as Indigenous women and people, we understand what we want and what we want for our community. I will be starting a little poem I wrote. As a all I knew was my school, my family, my public and baseball game. As I got older, I noticed things were changing. I was changing. For me, the world didn't seem as bright, as colorful as I saw as a child. That's when I started to see the world a little grayer. I was being shown my body was nothing more than an object. Here's the saddest part. I wasn't the only one. A history book says that a Native woman was worth 1 horse during trading. A Native child was worth 3 horses. To think our bodies had a price tag, yet they still do. To think when the first colonizers stepped foot here, the Indigenous women were the first to be targeted. To think after many
I am sorry to interrupt. This is the court
murder
reporter,
rates are 10
and
times.
it is really
We all know that is the statistics protecting ourselves, yet that sadly isn't enough. For years, we have been silent, and now it's more than a better opportunity to fight, to stand, to kneel, and to shout, and to speak up. When a young Indigenous girl is reported missing, authorities say that she is a runaway. And then when it's too late, they say that we should have reported her sooner. We as a community have to go out and find what happened to our sisters. Let me ask, what are we going to tell the next? Can everybody hear me?
Jalen,
Yes.
I think you're breaking up a little bit, but I think that's just part of technology. And so I think you should continue. Barbara, we can try to work with you. Maybe we can get the poem from Jalen so that we can supplement the record. But I want to respect her time and have her to continue. And this is just something that we're going to have to work through because of technology. So thank you, Jalen.
Okay. Generation of leaders to tell the next young woman leaders that they're going to have to look over their shoulders every time they are alone, to tell her that she has to be afraid just because of her ethnicity, to tell her just because of who she loves, to tell him because of who he loves that they have to be scared too. No, let not that happen. If change is going to happen, let change happen now. Let's pressure the local authorities to find our girls, to find our boys. Let's thinking about this poem, I really thought about a lot of the missing and murdered Indigenous women who do not have a chance, who basically don't have a chance of, when people say we don't have a chance of coming home. And little sister, when my uncle decided to let us go to the mall, he said, make sure you beat up anyone who looks at you guys. And I really thought, why do we have to be worried all the time if someone is coming for us, especially just because who we are and who we look like? And I don't want that for any other youth. I don't want that for my sister. I don't want that for the next generation. And that's physically possible. I want to help the next generation and to help them not be afraid anymore. And thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jalen. Thank you very much for those words. Thank you for your poem. And I believe in the chat that they asked if you could share the poem maybe in the chat also too. So I don't know if you would like to do that, but that was a great poem. Thank you very much and great feedback from you. So we'll go on to the next presenter, our youth perspective, and we'll turn this over to Tata Swiftbird.
Hello, good morning, relatives. My name is Tata Scully Swiftwood, but I go by Tata, and I am 13 years old. This is my first time
You can
in
ask
this.
them to change that. You can ask them to move the slides forward.
You can go to the next slide. I greet you with a good heart and handshake. I was born on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in Porcupine District, but I have been in New Mexico for the last 4 years. My family and I reside on traditional Ecos Pueblo and Hickory Apache territory. I am honored to be able to participate in the task force and represent the youth perspective. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the question number one, what are your strengths and what are issues around safety that you face in your community? My strengths are drawing and animation, creative writing, grounded, compassionate, resilient, and generous. Safety issues. Back at home on the res, high rates of suicide, sexual abuse, rape culture, domestic violence, and drug and alcohol abuse. All rooted in generational trauma and extreme poverty. There is also a high rate of MMIWR. Here in New Mexico, we live rurally, running away from home, from my own thoughts for self-harm. There's a high rate of MMIW here in New Mexico. Next slide, please. And moving on to question number two, where do you go for support and services now? Family at home, friends and family outside the home, support services from Serena Solutions, and Mesa Vista Wellness. Next slide, please. We have to question number three. If you had the best services, what would they look like? They would look like our remake creation center called Chikahokshi. In my language means umbilical cord teaching, where I get to learn how to create safe spaces. It's still a work in progress, but soon we will have TVs and courses. This year, I learned a lot about growing food and making medicines, being connected to the land, and yoga teaching, and other cultural responsibilities of being a local resident. Next slide, please. Here are some pictures of where I live, connecting to the land and the elements. I'm sorry if I'm very stuttery. I'm nervous because it's my first time in the meeting. You can go to the next slide. And here are some foods we grew on our garden. And I don't really have much to say about it, but it's pretty. Next slide, please. And here are some pictures of me reconnecting with medicine from my other relatives. And yeah, next slide, please. There are other pictures of medicines that we send to people for mutual aid. And I have been helping with that with my mom. She usually does matching effects, but next slide, please. There are pictures of me connecting to my culture. Some of them are real, but I don't know what to say about this one. So, next slide, please. There are early pictures of me and my family. It's next slide, please. And then there's my short bio. There's also another bio in the chat. It reads, I'm a traditional performer, powwow dancer, photographer, artist, body protector, and my contact is to help us find that Rise on My Foundation. Next slide, please. And I am featured in a documentary called The Women of the White Buffalo. Next to it is the name. Yes, that was the Edmonton Film Festival's 2019 Best Documentary of the Year. And that's all I have to say.
I just want to jump in really quickly and just mention something Tata and I were talking about right before we got on here. And one of the other safety concerns that we had come up this summer was an online predator. And we had to make reports to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI. And I'm a CSET survivor leader myself. So it brought up a lot for me, but just the way I'm witnessing Tata navigate all of the challenges that youth have these days, which are even more than we had, and we grew up, you know, with challenges. So I just really want to just say how proud I am of her for how she navigates and how honest and brave she is in her own journey to heal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Tata. That was a good presentation for being your first time and speaking and stuff. And I loved your PowerPoints. I love the graphics and the pictures and stuff. So I might need some pointers. But great job. I'm really proud of you also too. So we'll move on to our next presenter, and their bio is going to be put into the chat slide in the chat room also. And our next presenter, I'll turn it over to Jovita Belgarde, who works for the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, and I will turn it over. I hope I said your name right, because I was telling the people that I butcher names like I butcher sheep.
Thank you, Maddie. That was great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jovita Belgarde. I'm Okewinge Esleda, and I'm Turtle Mountain Ojibwe. And I'm up here in Ojibwe territory this morning. So thank you for having me. My pronouns are she and they. And I am the Native Youth Coordinator for the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. I wanted to start by saying thank you to Jaylin and Tata for your words this morning. It's always inspiring to hear directly from youth. And you are growing up to be strong leaders of your communities. And I think that that's really something to be proud of. And thank you. So, okay, let's get started. So I've been in prevention for about 6 years, working with Native youth and LGBTQ Native youth as well. So I always get really excited to dork out about prevention stuff, barriers, and all the things that we should be doing to help them. So, all right, we can go ahead and get started with the first slide, please. Okay. There we go. So one thing is I work from a strengths-based perspective, so I think it's important to start that way and to not just think about issues or problems in our communities in kind of that negative way, but to think about it with the strength of our communities, right? Because the solutions to the violence in our communities exist within ourselves, right? We are self-determined peoples, and we know the best ways to address these issues if we do it together. So, next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to start with a few statistics to kind of give some context to this conversation. So Native youth are impacted by violence in a lot of ways. These statistics stand out to me a lot. 40% of children experience violence before the age of 8. This is specifically Native children, right? Native youth, which is a lot, right? Especially if you could be experiencing violence in all these different ways that are listed at the bottom. It really can impact the way that you see the world and the way that you move through this world, right? 1 in 10 Native high school students have experienced physical dating violence in the past year. And this is a current statistic from the New Mexico Youth Risk and Resiliency Survey that each student takes every other year. So this is a current statistic, which is kind of overwhelming when you think about how many of our young people are struggling with violence, whether that be physical or verbal or like emotional or mental violence, or if that's happening online through like cyberbullying or things like sexual violence and dating violence. It can really impact the way that you move through the world, right? Next slide, please. Okay, and if we think about our LGBTQ2S plus relatives, they are also at heightened risk of experiencing violence. So 1 in 4, so that's 25% of LGBTQ Native students in New Mexico have reported experiencing bullying at least once during the last year, which is a lot, right? Like a quarter of our LGBTQ Native kids are being bullied. That's a lot. And then 17.8% of them are experiencing sexual violence as well, like at least in the past year. So I think that Jalen's poem really highlighted, and when she was speaking, she was talking about just being sexualized for being an LGBTQ youth and how hard that is. And I think that's really important to keep in mind when we're having these conversations. Next slide, please. And so I love this little baby Yoda, because if I think of a supportive auntie or supportive relative, I'm all, that's what I want. We need supportive adults, supportive individuals, supportive community to be there for our Native youth and LGBTQ2S plus relatives. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we're going to talk about some of the barriers that these two populations are dealing with, it's a lot of different things from the things we've already mentioned, like domestic violence or sexual violence, to just issues of personal wellness, right? Like homelessness, like not having a house, being houseless. Access to adequate healthcare, so being able to care for your body and your physical and your mental wellness. Access to bathrooms, right? So many of our LGBTQ relatives hold the bathroom all day long because they get harassed when they try to use their restroom, and that's a really hard way to go through life. Our trans relatives sometimes are misgendered. Oftentimes it's unintentional, but when it's intentional, that can be especially harmful. Sometimes our youth are outed without their consent, which is can really impact how you leave your house in the morning, right? If you are not ready to share that with the world, the possibility of violence is real, right? Like real physical violence, as well as just in their social networks. So that can be really hard, right? Bullying is really prevalent with, all youth, but especially our LGBTQ2S plus relatives, and cyberbullying. It's where a lot of it happens, is online. Suicide is a big issue with Native youth, and we've been trying our best to create networks of support to address those issues, right? But I know it's a taboo thing to talk about in a lot of tribal communities, but it's something we need to so we can fix it. And also just in general, Native youth and LGBTQ2S plus relatives being vulnerable to becoming a missing and murdered Indigenous relative. And then our youth, if you think about what else, our youth mentioned some of those things as well. They said, rape culture, which I thought was huge. They, just all of these things, over sexualization of LGBTQ folks. There's a lot of different things and barriers facing youth and LGBTQ community to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the exciting part. This is where I get to geek out about prevention. So I love prevention. And what does that programming look like if we're talking about preventing bullying, violence, we're talking about preventing suicide, preventing all of those things that we talked about in the previous slide. A huge part of that is just making sure that we're meeting people's basic needs, right? If they have homes and they have healthy foods, they have access to clean air, clean water, right? Like good healthcare, and they feel safe, they're gonna do better in this world, right? And violence that is happening in our communities isn't just by other people, right? There's also violence happening to the land, right? If we talk about like uranium mining, fracking that's going on in our communities, what happens to the land happens to the people, right? So when landfills releasing tritium into our environments, it's poisoning the land, the water, the animals, the plants, and then the people too, right? And then, if we want to address those things, prevention can look like a lot of different things. Something that I work particularly in is making sure that we teach youth and LGBTQ community, elders, everyone, things like healthy relationship skills, healthy communication, teaching people about consent, what that means, what that looks like, how to set boundaries, and how that can be beneficial for your wellness, right? Like your body autonomy, your body is your own. Just teaching community about LGBTQ2S plus community and doing Trans 101. I know Maddie Jim does Trans 101 and does an excellent job. And we really need those things. Not just we don't need to just educate youth, but we also need to educate families. We need to educate communities so we can create that culture of acceptance. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have a lot of recommendations. Most of my presentation is recommendations, let's be real. So I'm not going to read through all of these because it feels like a lot, but I invite everyone that's on this call right now to read through them. I have PowerPoints and things. I try not to read, but I thought it was really important for recommendations to be really explicit on what we can do.
Jovita,
yeah.
you have a little bit of time, so if you want to read through them, I feel that giving a voice, even when you read it, does great. It resonates. So if you want to read through it, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I put at the top, these are recommendations, not just for you all here, but it's also for people that sit on school boards. These are for teachers, for parents, for elders, for tribal leaders and direct service providers. I know that you all are doing amazing work in your communities, and we hope that you continue to do that good work and keep these things in mind, because I think that we'll all be stronger and better if we can do some of these things to help our communities. So first, my recommendation is to create programming to educate all of these people about gender, about sexuality, to better support LGBTQ2S plus Native youth. If they know about those things, if they're educated, they'll know what to do and how to support them better, right? And they're going to do better in school, they're going to do better in life. And then also fund organizations already doing the work, right? There are people that are out there doing prevention programming. They're working directly with youth, or they're working with service providers, or they're providing services in some way. Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. We do some violence prevention programming. Table Women United is out there doing great programming right now. New Mexico GSA, they help provide services and create GSA, like GSAs in different schools. So the Gender Sexualities Alliance, so they teach people about LGBTQ issues. The Transgender Resource Center, they provide incredible services to our trans community in Albuquerque. And some other preventionists that are really doing cool stuff with Native youth, or people like the Capo Kids and the Table Root Society. They're incorporating culture into what they're doing, and really bringing those things together because they're important, right? Our cultural teachings along with our cultural values. So just, in general, if we are encouraging positive relationship building with healthy people, and those folks are modeling behaviors of acceptance and support, it's going to spread, right? More and more people are going to jump on that bandwagon and do what they can to support, because they're going to learn it. It's modeled by other community members, by our leaders. And we want to create those networks of support by creating more services, right? Like whether it's like creating more safe spaces in schools, or creating more safe spaces in homes, or wherever in community. We need more mental health services. We need more counseling services specifically for Native youth. We need more mental health services specifically for LGBTQ individuals, even LGBTQ youth. That would be great. Even if we had more, like we have one LGBTQ homeless shelter in Albuquerque, and yeah, Casa Q is amazing, but I think they only have like 12 to 14 beds. And if you think about when our LGBTQ youth come out and how many of them are kicked out of their homes and they have to live on the street, right? Creating more services for them would be huge. Creating more services around substance use, around suicidality, right? Like more suicide prevention and intervention, right? Like we have some crisis lines, we could always use more. We need more services. Some things that you can do as an individual. If you see someone misgendered, make a correction and move on, right? Their pronoun is they, them. Thanks. Just move on, keep it moving. Address anti-LGBTQ sentiments and language in your homes and community. We've been talking a lot about recently about anti-Blackness in tribal communities. Well, there's a lot of anti-LGBTQ stuff that happens in our home, and there's a lot of jokes that we let slide, or family members that we let say kind of bad things. But we think about that, and these things that we might let slide are really impactful for someone who is dealing with their identity and maybe is afraid to come out because they don't feel safe. And then just stop enforcing the gender binary on folks. Stop unnecessary gendering. So many things in tribal communities are gendered already, and this can be especially hard for our trans and non-binary relatives. So if there's any way to not create that culture, let's do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so some more recommendations. So one thing that I think is super important is creating universal bathrooms in any single bathroom space. And you can do that anywhere. You can do that in a school. You can do that in a community space. You can do that in a tribal building, in a state building. If there is a single bathroom, make it a universal bathroom. Anybody can go in there, and that is creating a culture of support. So promote the work of Native youth, right? Like Jaylin and Tata, like promote their work, promote the work of LGBTQ2S plus relatives and role models. We need to know about those role models too in the community. Teach our histories, revere them. People need to learn about it in government and schools and community. That's why I put this cool little like art piece. I took it from the Indigenous Goddess Gang article, but this is one a graphic about Lozen, who was a pretty badass, sorry for my language, Native LGBTQ2S plus relative, their hero. So read about them, teach about them. And then just talk about our stories, right? Talk about the medicine and the sacredness that LGBTQ2S plus folks hold. You know, in my tribes, those folks have been keepers of certain social medicine and like keepers of stories in my community, and that's something that not everybody knows, and we should talk about those things. Right. Sorry to scream this, but stop over policing Native youth and LGBTQ2S plus folks. It's lateral violence, right? The last thing our communities need is to be over policed and to face more violence on top of the violence they're already facing. And then when you do something wrong, recognize it, own it, and do better. I think that we're all learning. It's a learning process. And if we can do that, that helps us all. The next slide, please. Okay, so if we're talking about addressing systematic issues in tribal communities, I was talking about this with some coalition folks yesterday. So one thing that we think is super important as a coalition is creating broadband infrastructure for rural Native youth so they can access information. So right now, so many people are doing at-home school, but like as you noticed with Jalen and Tata, they were kind of cutting in and out at different points. Like we don't have the broadband infrastructure for people to access the internet with equity across tribal communities, and that's so important to be able to like go to school to access information. That should be a right of all people. Also, the public education department should create curriculum in schools around anti-discrimination for LGBTQ2S plus folks, right? I think that that's really important, and we should continue to do that. I know that a lot of our rights have been being repealed and being changed, but we should still push for that because that's really important. And then also fully implement the decision made by Yazzie versus Martinez, right? We should create historically inclusive curriculum. We should learn about, when we're learning about things in school, we should be learning about colonization. We should be learning about the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. We should learn about indigenous rebellion, indigenous folks that are, you know, making moves in history. We need to learn our histories as well as, you know, the colonizers' history. We should learn everyone's. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and that's it. So Kunawoha, thank you so much for giving me the time. I would love to stay in touch with you all if you have more information, or if you all ever need support in any of these things. It's what I do. This is our office address, and this is my personal email if you'd like to email me. And feel free to check out our website, the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, csvanw.org. I just want to also kind of mention one of the questions that was posed to us were, what are resources in the community? We have something called Advocacy Corner on our website. If you click on it, it has different resources for things like domestic violence, for, you know, crisis lines, for all kinds of different things. So if you're looking for resources, that's a really great place to look. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jovita. That was a lot of information, and thank you for those words. And I like how you infuse youth population and also with Native LGBTQ communities. And also you gave really good valid points on what needs to be done. And I love the recommendations that it's written down. So I'm really happy that the task force is going to take that and possibly use that in the work that they do. So I'm very happy. And then also to the two presenters, Tata and Jalen, thank you so much for speaking and presenting for this panel. And I'm wondering if there's any questions, maybe for a couple of minutes, maybe one or two questions that the participants have for our youth panel that they want to ask, to type it in the chat. And if it's specific to a certain person, put their name. So I'll give you a second to do that. And if not, we'll move on. Okay, I got a question up. It says, what do you prioritize today? Let's start with Jalen. So I think the question is, what do you prioritize in life today, I believe, is the question. Yeah.
Okay. For me, what I prioritize is our younger youth. I'm not old yet, but like I said, I have a younger sister cousin, and I would do anything to protect her and make sure she has a very happy and beautiful life, and whatever she decides to do, I want to support. Go through some of the things me and my friends have gone through with a lot of like being um a bisexual woman, and then also just being a native woman as that too. But mostly I just want to prioritize the youth, teaching them our history, teaching them that love is love, and whoever you love, that's all that matters. It's love, and love is the best thing that anyone can give and that the creator gave us.
Thank you, Jalen. Thank you so much. Tata, do you want to answer that? The question is, what do you prioritize in your life today? Meaning, what's important to you? What do you put first in your life?
My family, my family and my culture. I don't really have much to say about that, but there's two things I put in my life. My family and my culture. They're the most important things.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay, Jovita, next question. Same question.
Oh, thank you. I love that. Your family, your culture, that's beautiful. I think for me, I think just prioritizing wellness, right? Like our community's overall wellness, and that includes things like culture and family, right? Like what can we do to support our community members so they can be the best that they can be and show up for us as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So our next question is, as an educator, what signs should I be looking for in my students who might be suffering in silence? Same order. Jalen, do you want to go first?
Okay. Personally, I think the signs to look out for is if not necessarily if they pull away from the class or the group, because I was a shy kid. A lot of my friends are shy kids. We just didn't want to interact with anyone. That doesn't necessarily mean we were going through a rough time, but if they're being pulled away and if they seem to be looking kind of down every day, just check up on them, just ask them, hey, what's going on? Directly ask them a question, just like pick up little conversations with them here and there. And if you can, if you are very close with one of the other students, or if the other students wants to help, let them help. And I think the students should also get a little bit more, like make sure every other student knows, like, hey, like look out for this person. You guys need to look out for each other.
Awesome. Tata?
I'd go with Jalen. What the signs of how look at their shoulders, how like are they positioned, and look at their eyes, or are their eyes on the ground, or are their like face expressions sad? Yeah, I'd go with Jalen for that.
Okay, thank you. Jovita? I know you're a youth coordinator and I know you look for signs and stuff too, so maybe you can give some tips to that question.
Thank you. I thank you for this question. So when I've worked with youth a lot, a big thing is not necessarily just like both Jalen and Tata said, like if they have a change in behavior, if they're looking down, but also like I would say just like any major change in behavior. Because I've had teenagers and middle schoolers go from being really talkative to really silent, but I've also seen people who maybe are more silent on the regular have like a big change and just really like want things to move forward or like really like they're any like they change from being one way to another way in a really drastic way. A lot of times they're trying to cope with something, right? Like if there's a good-natured person and then they're all of a sudden acting more angry or more impatient, or if maybe they're someone who usually gets along with people and they're starting fights with people, they're starting arguments over little things, that could be an indication that they're stressed in some other way in their life. From something happening at home to like bullying or something else. So it's always good to ask and just to offer support in whatever way that they're willing to accept.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So another question. We have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to fill it. Can any of the youth panel talk more about barriers to having to access support from law enforcement and or tribal behavioral support health services? I'll open it up to either one of you to start. Did you want me to repeat the question?
I can respond to this one if
Okay.
none of them are jumping in right away. Okay. I think that I think that going back to those kind of trainings are creating a culture of acceptance around law enforcement and behavioral health services. I feel like when people don't feel very supported, either Native youth, they're not feeling like they're being heard or listened to, or LGBTQ2S plus, like those same issues, or even feeling comfortable just existing without being violenced. Like I think there's a lot of lateral violence, meaning there are a lot of people in our tribal communities that say bad things about youth or say bad things about LGBTQ folks, and so they might not feel safe to access law enforcement or behavioral health services at their tribe. And if we can start to change those cultures and to make them more accepting and more welcoming and more warm, that people would feel more comfortable. And then also if law enforcement stopped shooting brown people, that would help too. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Tata, do you want to answer this? What makes it harder to go to the police or counseling services for youth?
Fear, like generational fear. Yes. Fear of destruction.
Are you done? Okay, thank you. Jalen, do you want to answer that question?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Can any of the youth panel talk more about barriers to having to access support from law enforcement and or tribal behavioral support health services, which I kind of broke it down simply to what makes it harder to go to the police for support and also to counseling services to get help?
No, especially with everything going right now. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and maybe the police force, and especially one specific person doesn't really believe in this one person and who they are and who they love, and that makes it hard. And that's what makes it really hard to go to them, because you don't know if you're going to get shut down just because of who you are. And I think that we need more people who are kind of like us to be in the law enforcement and stuff like that, because that's going to make it a lot easier for our youth to go to them and ask for help.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for the answer. So we're on time. So I believe we are going to do the next panel. But first, I want to thank the youth panel for providing great information, education. Thank you, Tata. Thank you, Jalen, Jovita, for your words, your recommendations, and giving voice to our youth panel, our youth community also. And I think we had one more question, which I feel that maybe you could put your answers into the chat box so that they know. But the last question that was on here was, do you think social media is useful to native youth to build community without strong broadband in New Mexico? So if you want to do your answer in the chat box and that would be great. So yes, I want to say thank you for that. A lot of great information, education, and Jovita, thank you for your presentation and putting it in PowerPoint, which kind of links it into our next segue into our Native LGBTQ Two-Spirit portion. So we have two panelists who are in that panel, and I know both of them, so I'm really happy that they're a part of this and very thankful that they agreed to do this. And so I will turn this over to our first presenter. And like I said, this panel is going to be around Native LGBTQ Two-Spirit issues or talk in what we know. And I believe our first presenter is going to talk around cultural knowledge, being a cultural knowledge keeper and keeping culture and tradition alive within our communities. So I want to turn this over, and I hope that they're ready, and it's great to see you on here, Sheldon. So I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Sheldon Shante Nunez Velarde. So I will turn it over to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. my name is Sheldon Nunez Velarde. I'm from the Hickory Apache Reservation. I'm from the Oyero clan. And I'm an artist, full-time artist, and I also work at our Cultural Heritage and Cultural Center in Dulce, New Mexico. And I've been doing artwork ever since I was young. When you were talking about the cultural knowledge keeper, one of the things that I have done was go beyond the roles between female and male within our community, and I really raised a lot of drama or ruckus when I was wanting to learn the art of basket weaving, and that is strictly reserved for women only. And it was a big issue. When I was younger, I'd always ask my grandmothers if I could make baskets, and they were very traditional, and they were my grandmother's cousins and aunts. And when they were alive, they totally refused me because I was male, and they said it's not for you. But later, after they were all gone, I came before it again, and I asked when I got a job with the cultural center, they do basket weaving there, and the lady at the time knew my grandmothers, and she knew what I had asked before when I was younger, and she had told me that I'd have to go before the cultural the group there, the elder group that's still there in Dulce and the cultural center. So I had done that, and I sat before them one day, and it took all day, and I was asking them, and they were going back and forth with the cultural aspects and stuff. But in the end, I got permission, and being that I'm Two-Spirit, they had let me do this. So then I had to go before the council and the the president. And they all approved except for the president. He was very adamant and against it. But in the end, I ended up making baskets, and I do pretty good at my baskets. I have a lot of LGBT youth that come to me looking for information about stuff. And, I don't know the traditional part that goes about our culture way back then about being the LGBT community, but it was there, but it wasn't how would you say it, presented it wasn't shown that much, but we were always there, and I talked to elders about it. But anyway, that was just one of my what I had to go through was basket weaving, and of course the pottery, that's a woman's thing also, but I also overcame that, and I do beadwork and moccasin making and stuff like that. So I teach a lot of our youth and around and the people who's interested in our culture. That's about what I have to say about any questions or
Sheldon, do you want to answer any of the questions that were emailed to you? Unless you want me to ask you a few questions to go off.
Another thing that I was looking at, like Jovita's her presentation on our reservation currently, there are no services for the LGBT community, and I see a lot of our youth, the younger ones coming up, and they come to me and they ask me questions, and I'm always there for them open, but it seems like they have a hard time with it. I mean, coming out in our communities. For example, like I asked my mother, I said, I don't have no problems with my people. She's like, because I've always known you and they respect you. And I said, and then she says, you didn't come out and just start just automatically change overnight. She's they gradually grew with you. Because I told her I don't get no flack about being who I am, but these younger kids, they have a hard time, and I don't know what the difference was. It's still confusing to me about why they're having such a hard time, but I see their struggles, and in the end, they end up leaving the reservation and they don't come back. And I don't, like, for example, I have a niece who came out as trans, and she went through her whole changes, but she feels comfortable living off the reservation. And I asked her, and she just called like an hour ago. And I said, how are you doing? She's like, all right. And I was asking her about it. Like, how do you feel? And she said, I feel a lot better. She's my family's there for support, but she just doesn't feel comfortable living amongst us. And I asked her, will you ever come back? She's like, no. I was like, okay. So it's just something I want to bring out. Go ahead, Maddie.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask you a few questions as we go down the road to fill in some of the stuff. So if you could have the best services, what would that look like in your tribal community?
We need just support for the LGBT youth. We don't have that at all, and there's nowhere they can go. So we just need a foundation. There's nothing here. It's still taboo and hushed and not talked about it. And I remember Maddie back in the day, she used to come up and try to help us out. But another thing is we don't get along. A lot of our LGBT, we just don't get along with each other. And it's just always been like that. That's another issue that blocks it. Yeah.
Yes. So just to share a little bit, yes, I've known Sheldon for a long time, and we met many years ago in some of the gay prides that we used to attend, and represented the Native Pride float. So it's really good to see you on here. So just a couple more questions you could possibly answer for the group. What do you recommend for addressing ignorance, discriminatory policies, and community education on ensuring equity in tribal and other communities for LGBTQ two-spirit people?
We just need to get together as ones, like in our communities, and go towards the common goal for recognition and respect, and for teaching other people, in our community about, that we're here, and, what we're here, that we're here.
Okay. And then the next question is, what can we recommend to our governor or president or legislator immediately so that violence can be reported or services be made more accessible And what are some of the challenges if they exist?
It's just amongst the community about just being how would you say, everybody's to themselves, and they need to be opened up more and more aware of these. But like, for example, in my community, it's very closed, and it's just how it's been. Like, I asked my mom about this, that I was going to be on here, and she said that we're still behind on everything, and it's still closed. And a lot of the ones who come out, like the LGBT, they're stigmatized. They come up to, I don't know how I would say it. They just present themselves in a different way. I guess they have to be more, more, like, for example, I'm not out and about like some of these other people are, but they need to have, I don't know, go about it slow. And I guess.
Okay, and I'm kind of aware, like, all the traveling that you do also too,
Yes.
and you do a lot of cultural teaching everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask also too, maybe you could talk a little bit about the traveling that you do, your cultural teachings,
Sure.
and also how you infuse your identity as somebody who's two-spirit into some of those teachings
Okay.
for
Well,
education.
good thing you answered that, because I spent a lot of time in the South Pacific, and I was adopted by a Samoan family, and we just bonded instantly. And one of the reasons why I went there is because they have a third gender called Fa'afine. So I went over there and I met my family, and we really bonded instantly, and they eventually adopted me into their family. The Matai, the chief of the family, had to come and see who I was, and before I was adopted into their family. But it's been like 4 years now, and they treat me like their sister. They call me girl, and the pronouns with her, and they're really respectful. And what really got me last year was when I went back for vacation. I usually go for a month. My sister pulled me aside and she's like, sister, we never had a Fafaifine in our family. She said, you're the first. And I thought that was so cool. I was like, so do you guys really accept me? And she's like, yeah. So me and my Samoan sister, we went through a tattoos. We got tattoos done, and we got the marks that are only for female, and they had let me do the marks. And this is kind of like what I had got on my hands, and it's called a mana. I can't know if you can see it, but it's on the hands. And I was so happy that they let me do that. And it's strictly taboo over there, but they had let me do that. Another thing is, like, when I like to travel, I like to experience other indigenous cultures. I was in Oaxaca this past Christmas, and I went to visit the Mushi. The Mushis are a native trans community that live in Oaxaca. And they invited me to visit and share in their culture. And they had told me that they wanted me to. They have a big festival in November coming up. I can't go because of COVID right now, but they dress in their traditional attire, their big flower dresses and stuff. So I went and made a down payment on one of my outfits, and I was supposed to do that this November, but due to COVID, I won't be able to go. But they're making my dress, and I can't wait till it's done so I can be involved with their ceremonies that they're doing their festival. So I like to go overseas and experience like, for example, the Mushi, the Fafaifines. I like to see different cultures, and I also share my Apache culture with them and who I am. So I just like doing that also.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. And I like the way that you're talking about how this is globally recognized. And a lot of times,
yes,
we don't look at it as something that's global, where there's indigenous communities throughout the world that have in Western context the identity of Native LGBTQ2 communities. And it's good to hear that you've experienced other cultures and their identities and how they address things too.
Yes.
And also, you had mentioned that you talk to your elders and stuff. Could you share a little bit more about the stories that the elders shared with you about possible Native LGBTQ2 people in the past?
Well, I've asked one of my uncles, and my grandmother. we didn't really talk about this issue, but one of my uncles, I had asked him, and he just said that we were visible, but we weren't. We just were like invisible. How would you say it? We weren't always out there, but we were always around because they remember people doing this and doing things like that, like the LGB part. But there's a famous picture. It's a Hickory Edward Curtis, and it's of a Hickory. It was a woman, but later I found out one of the medicine men said that it was a trans, it was a boy dressed up like a girl. So it did happen long ago, but it was probably due to Christianity that was forgotten. But I was always drawn to that picture when I go to shows. She brings me good luck. So I always have that picture with me. And I was wondering why I was always drawn to that. But getting back to the cultural part, it was there, but nobody, they didn't say nothing. And it's still like that to this day. And that's what I have to say.
Oh,
Mhm.
another question. Do you feel like what do you feel like your roles are within your tribal community on who you are and your identity? Do you get any like backlash or people discriminate
No.
against you?
Like I said, I asked my mom, I said, well, I don't get no problems being for who I am. But she's like, because you have the respect and the people know you since you were little, and you're always doing the arts and crafts, and you're in the schools and going all over the place. And I hate to say it, but a lot of the LGBT in my community, there are a lot of alcoholism, and that kind of affects them. And when they're drunk, they see how they act, and they get that stigmatized. So you have to display or show yourself in a different way so that you can get respect, I guess. But to this day, hardly, I don't, not in front of me, in front of my face, but I don't hear people talk about me or say bad things about me, because I'm always, teaching and stuff. And I love to travel.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And you are right. Just wanted to touch up also on our communities. And we do see a lot of alcoholism within our tribal
Yeah.
communities and stuff. And I think that's across the board, and how we address those issues too. And even colonization is a part of that, especially with identities. And I think one thing I want to point out to the group is also that anthropology, what we read, is one-sided. So meaning that the anthropologist that wrote our history was more on their side and what they saw. So with Native LGBT communities, we were stigmatized in a bad way because of that mentality of Western thought of like with religious factors, like men are not supposed to date men or sleep with men. So even the word bardash came about, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. I know some people as participants or from the community, they know the history, but with the word bardash, like when you broke it down, it's like it meant to say that you were a kept slave boy for unnatural purposes. And so that's a negative right there. And that's how the outside people saw our community, and they put that down on paper. So that's what was written about us. So as time went on, that was part of the colonization and the teachings that were done, that we're stigmatized in a bad way. As to where before colonization, I feel that we were part of the community, just like you expressed, that you're a teacher, people respect you, you teach others, you carry on your culture and traditions, and that's the role that you provide. And I think that goes back to why they don't talk about our community. I mean, they don't like really talk about us, because we just a part of the community, and we do it. Just like for me, when I go back to ceremony, what years ago, and I used to like cook and help out and do the role of what women would do, or feel like people that thought that's what women should do. But things are changing now, and because we have like non-binary identified people, gender non-conforming, and people are integrating a lot of roles and stuff, and really looking at how we identify or look at what people do and how we're addressed or stigmatized. So just wanted to point that out. And then with pronouns too, is a part of that binary system too, because some feel that they are not of male or female and stuff. So those teachings were a part of Western thought as to where with cultural teachings, I feel that the definitions we use nowadays with non-binary was used before colonization, but it's hard to explain in Western context when it's very traditional. So thank you for your words. Thank you for enlightening us on some. And I always said that I was going to come up and visit, so I plan on still doing that and share more words. So we'll move on. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I move on to the next presenter?
No, that was it. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope I shared some.
Okay, awesome. So participants, if you have questions for Sheldon, please put it in the chat, and then after our next speaker, we'll ask some of the questions that people write in the chat box. So with our next, I'm going to move on to our next presenter. A panelist person is Renee Gray, is going to be our next presenter. And I'm going to turn it over. She's an independent consultant, so I'm going to turn it over to her. So Renee, if you're ready, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I believe I sent my presentation, my PowerPoint earlier this morning. Is someone able to upload it?
You did, Renee. 1 second.
All right, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is really taking a lot of knowledge from this presentation, from everyone. It really has been a learning experience, especially with our youth. Our youth is one of the population that is very underserved, and so they're often overlooked as well. So our youth are much important. They're the ones who are making all these radical changes for us older people. And so we're having to learn these new ways when it comes to our youth, because they're the one that's saying, we stop the bullshit, stop the hate, stop all this stuff. And so we're actually learning from them. So we have to really, really incorporate them into our teachings with us older people. I'll always look after your youth, because they are very important. They are our next generations of leaders. All right. With that said, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Renee Gray, and this is a presentation in regards to the transgender population. And so I titled it Transcending the Binary, because we live in a society where only men and women exist, or Western knowledge and Western teaching teaches that only men and women exist. But we're here as trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, gender fluid people. We're here in the mix of all of that. And so I'm here to give you a light to what it means and what the life of a trans person is like. Next slide, please. Does everyone hear me? Am I okay? My voice sound is good? Thumbs up?
You are perfect, Renee.
Awesome.
We can hear you, everything.
Blossoms. Okay. Hope I'm not breathing too loud into the microphone. I always like to first off start off my presentations giving honor to my sisters, my native trans sisters who have passed before their time and before us as well, and their voices were taken up before their time. And so really honor our native sisters, our trans sisters that have gone before us. And some of my trans sisters who I grew up with, who I went to high school with, who I've grown to love and dear, were taken far too soon. And their murders are still not solved. And so really honor our native trans sisters, especially here in New Mexico, where they're continuously dropping like flies. And it's really scary concept to really think about our native transes, our native trans relatives dying like flies. So thank you. Next slide, please. So this is me here. My name is Renee Gray. Renee Gray and Shekia on influence aski bashin between and my name is Renee Gray. Identify as a Diné trans woman. And that in itself is a political statement in itself, because it tells people in my surrounding as well as to the public that Native people are still alive, they're still existing, they're still thriving. And also the fact that when you put trans in there as well, it's definitely a tremendous, huge political statement. And it says that trans people are alive and well and living and resilient despite all of the violence that we have to deal with every single day in our lives. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers, but other appropriate terms are actually good. It's like Shay or whatever. And then I really hone in on my lived experiences when it comes to presentations that I do when it comes to Transgender 101s. And so with this presentation, I really condensed a 4-hour training to like 5 minutes. So it's gonna be a lot of information in 5 minutes, but I really like to hone in on my lived experiences. And I have lived and I continue to live with pervasive discrimination as a Native trans person, because if I step outside, there's a likelihood that I will die or get beat up or experience some kind of violence, pumping gas, going to the grocery store, being at Walmart, whatever it may be in public. I'm prone to being discriminated against and experience violence. Incarceration has been one of the things I also like to really incorporate into my presentation, because I was incarcerated in a male facility where I was objectified by the officers who were supposed to be taking care of us, but yet when people that were inmates of mine, they really took care of me. And so I really incorporate that as well. And stigmatization is really a huge thing when it comes to transgender people of all walks of life. We're constantly told, no, you're a man. No, you're a man in a dress. No, you should be like this. No. So that stigmatization is constantly on our shoulders, and we're constantly hearing that, no, you're not supposed to be like that. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And so when it comes to the transgender community, we also live in poverty because people don't want to hire us. People don't want us to be a part of society. We're basically seen as throwaways. We live on the streets. We have to suffer in our own demise of addiction, incarceration, all the experiences. People don't want to hire us. And so we live in poverty. And that also forces us into sex work. And so our only means of survival is doing sex work. And so poverty is one of the biggest issues that really pushes us onto the streets, because nobody wants to hire us. Near-death experiences are also really goes hand in hand with poverty, as well as stigmatization and incarceration. There are times where I've had knives to my throat when I was doing sex work. I've had a gun to my head. So these are really the realities of trans people who are trying to make ends meet, and our only way of that is through sex work. And so the probability of being killed while doing sex work is frightening. We think on the streets like, okay, I'll get back to you if I'm not here by whatever time. Start calling me, make sure that I'm okay. We give our sisters, other trans sisters who are on the streets as well, we let them know that, you know what, I'm doing this date and I'm going to be here, and if I don't come back around this time, if I'm going to be there much longer, then I'll give you a text, or if I don't text you back, then call me and let me know that I'm okay, make sure that I'm okay. So near-death experiences go hand in hand, as well as with homelessness. Again, because we live in poverty, nobody wants to hire us. We're constantly having to struggle. We're trying to find ways to make our ends meet. So we live on the streets. That's our place, and we find our existence there. And that's where most people see us as Native trans people, is on the streets, dealing with addiction. Addiction is something I've been dealing with for quite some times right now. And so addiction is something that really is a way of our coping when it comes to trans people, Native trans people, is our coping mechanism, because we don't know any other way of coping with our traumas, our issues, our near-death experiences, our reason for living in poverty, all that stigmatization, our traumatic experience with incarceration, discrimination that we constantly have to feel and have to endure every single day. We become addicted to drugs and alcohol. So that's a huge core reason that a lot of us do end up on the streets, or we end up dead, or whatever way, because of our addiction. And sexual assault is something that I've been dealing with the last 5 years, and it's something that I'm still coming to terms with. And so it's something that happened with a friend of mine that I thought I was safe around to be around with, but apparently I was just another trans person that he was with, and so he used me. He sexually assaulted me along with other people with him. And so sexual assault is also a huge part of transgenders' experiences of trauma. And when it comes to trauma for trans people, we don't have the ability, or we don't have we're not able to go and say, oh, I'm going to go to counseling. We don't have that ability. We're unable to do that because we're constantly struggling. We're constantly trying to survive. We're constantly trying to make money for our where we're going to lay tonight, what are we going to eat, our next fix, because we're constantly in that survival mode. And so when we're in that constant survival mode, we separate ourselves from our actual feelings. And so when we put into our survival mode, we're numb. We have to do what we need to do to get our next fix, lay our head down the next place. We're in that survival mode. It really is it's a human detachment. That's how I see it. And so that's my lived experiences. And so I really hone in on those experiences and give stories and give light to some of the statistics that really are pervasive within the transgender community. So next slide, please.
Renee,
Yes, hi.
You have a little bit of time, so you don't have to rush like you said you were going to do. So
okay,
take a deep breath, and you can.
Sometimes I get a little too excited, so I speak a lot, I talk a lot, and I can go for days on talking about a lot of these issues when it comes to the Native trans experiences, and so it really I become passionate. Sometimes I get carried away, so so please bear with me. And so I think I really wanted the goal of the purpose for this presentation was really for people who never had a Transgender 101 and never participated in Transgender 101, or who really is still trying to figure out what is a transgender person. So my goal was to give you a light bulb and a better understanding of what it is to be a transgender person, or what makes a transgender person is really the goal of this presentation, which is kind of short, but I hope that whatever information that I'm sharing will definitely give you a better understanding of who we are as people. And so this discussion again, I'll start off with a Transgender 101, a basic, from a 4-hour presentation to like a 5-minute presentation. And so I'll go over some transgender statistics from the 2015 transgender survey. And then I'll definitely give you some policies, ways to change policy and really to incorporate policy changes within your organization, as well as police departments and health facilities and just whatever services that you're providing to really help you make those policy changes that is really needed for transgender people. And so this little picture here of the person and with all these arrows pointing at them, this really gives an idea of what intersectionality is. And all of us can relate to this. We have education. We can identify on a sexuality spectrum. We're able or we're not able. So our abilities, our age, we all have that. Our gender, however way we want to identify. Our ethnicity, our culture, our language, our class, our race. These are the intersectionalities that we have to really look at when it comes to working with transgender people and providing services for transgender people. And so we can all place ourselves in that little person there in the middle with the arrows, and we can really identify with all of these different identities that are really pointing at us. Because that makes us who we are. We could be mothers, we can be aunties, we can be cousins, we can be dads, we can be step-parents. All of these identities make us who we are. And oftentimes when it comes to transgender people, we're often told you need to leave part of yourself at the door. You can't come in as a trans person. You can't come in as an addict. You can't come in as a homeless person. You can't, like, we're told to not come in as our whole selves, which prevents us from being there in our whole selves, being our authentic selves, and actually helping our whole self and not part of ourselves. Because you can't just help one arm and say, oh, you're fixed. No, we want the whole person to be there. So when it comes to services, agencies, whatnot, ask the person to come as their whole self. Don't push them away because they seem intoxicated or they're off the streets or whatever. Accept them as who they are, because you'll meet the most awesome person ever in your life when it comes to someone who's there in their true authentic self. So take that picture and keep it in your mind and really think transgender people are all the things that I could possibly be as well. Next slide, please. And so this here is really a 101 concept. So you see the male and female. You see the male and female, which is the standard paradigm through which we all operate. We can identify as a male, we can identify as a female, regardless if we're transgender or a transgender person. Because I can say I am a trans woman. a straight trans woman. And we can definitely put ourselves there. Tab, next, we can do tab or space bar on the presentation. And then here, so when it comes to sex assigned at birth, this is when a person or a child or baby is born, a newborn baby is born. The doctor pulls the baby out. Oh, it's a boy or girl, and slaps them on the butt. So the doctor identifies and assigns you by your gender and by your genitalia. Oh, it has a penis, so it's a baby boy. Oh, it has a vagina, it's a baby girl. But when it comes to intersex, it's like, okay, how do we put this baby in a box? Where do we put this baby in a box? And so oftentimes when it comes to intersex babies, they're often operated on and made into vagina because the vagina is much less complicated to make than a penis. And so sex assigned at birth is something that or your gender that your doctor assigned you as. So that's what your sex assigned at birth is. Both neither and neither, both and neither. This might be one more challenging concept, but most people are never made aware of the possibility that others may identify as agender, gender nonconforming, gender fluid, gender queer, non-binary, or bigender. So that's what the both and neither means. Tab, please, or next slide, or is it be another, you think? Again, please. And this here is where the concept of gender identity comes from. So someone who was sex assigned at birth male, which that's how I am. There's someone who now identifies as female. Now their gender identity is female, and they have crossed over, which makes them transgender. If someone who was sex assigned at birth as male boy and continues to identify as a male, then that's cisgender. Next tab, next slide, please, or keep going. Again. This here is our gender expression. So someone who identifies or who was sex assigned as boy at birth and continues to identify as male and their gender identity is male and that's how they perceive themselves. Now their gender expression can go any way. Someone can be gender non-conforming and be cisgender, or someone can be male and be gay. So gender expression is something that we see where a person expresses themselves. Women often wear lipsticks, get their hair curled, wear nails, barrettes in their hair, get dolled up and whatnot. That's the gender expression. Male like to wear maybe some Wranglers with a skull in the back and some boots and some cute top and a straw hat on. That's the gender expression of a male. That's how they want the world to perceive them as male. So again, sex assigned at birth is boy, gender identity is male, and current gender expression is male. That's cisgender because it's a straight line, it goes straight across. But someone, for example, like myself, sex assigned at birth is boy, I currently identify as a female, and my gender expression is female, feminine. That is transgender because I jumped over, I went to the other side. And so that is a female. And so next, please, next slide. This here is sexual orientation, someone who I'm attracted to. Like I said earlier, that I am a straight heterosexual trans woman, because the person that I'm attracted to is a male, someone who appears to be male, someone who has the essence of a masculine male. That's what I'm attracted to. Again, same concept with sex assigned at birth. Next slide, please. Gender expression, because right now when it comes to, next second, gender expression, again, when it comes to people who are of the opposite sex, I've learned within myself that, you know what, I just don't like men. I like the essence of a man. So I'm attracted to a trans man. I like how they carry themselves, I like that masculinity of them. So my sexual orientation is straight. I'm a straight transgender woman because I like the expression or gender expression of a male who could possibly be trans, but who could also be cisgender. So that's where the idea of sexual orientation comes from. Oftentimes, when it comes to transgender and gender or sexual orientation, they sometimes misconstrue and think that it's one and the same. So within the presentation, I've separated trans. So I put trans, LGBTQ, because again, when it comes to transgender is a gender identity, and sexual orientation, who I'm attracted to, is sexual orientation. So that's something that we have to really ingrain in people, that a transgender person is not a sexual orientation. It is a gender identity. It's how a woman can identify, how a man identifies. Transgender is a gender identity. And so when it comes to gender spectrum and sexual orientation, to truly hold space for trans LGBT people, we must suspend our disbelief and check at the door our perceived notion and what it is plausible and implausible in regards to the check at the door then our perceived notion of what is plausible and implausible with regards to others' avowed identity. Each circle are not necessarily linked. Your sex sign of birth does not dictate your gender identity. Your gender identity does not dictate your gender expression. They all work together to create your own sense of self, similar to cogs in the machine, how they intertwine and all the wheels moving. That's how this gender spectrum is. They're independent pieces with influences over one another. While at times it may be confusing and difficult to accept people's identity, your job as allies who are non-trans people, your job is to honor and acknowledge our transgender identity or people's identity and how they express themselves. If they're gender non-conforming, if they're non-binary, it is your job as non-trans people and allies to the transgender community to honor and acknowledge our identity. Next slide, please. So things you need to know when it comes to the transgender community. I think it's really important and really vital to understand what it is to be, or what it means to be transgender, or what it means that transgender is, to incorporate into the MMIW. We often say, we see a woman, that's it, but without regards to really understanding what a trans person is, and to really understand where they come from and why are they on the streets, why are they doing the things that they do. It's really important, very vital to understand the story behind the trans person or trans community as a whole, because often we are fighting a lot of our own demons, and that's what pushes us to the streets and whatnot. And as we all know, as Indigenous people of this land, colonization has had a huge impact on who we are as people and how we currently exist today. We're constantly fighting with ourselves as well as our non-native people. We're constantly in conflict because we're saying, oh no, this is us. No, we can't do this. This is what I was taught in my native language. No, I want to learn the Navajo language. No, you need to learn English. You need to go off to college. You need to get educated and come back to the people and fix your people and help your people. But the idea behind that issue is, okay, when you learn all this Western knowledge and Western ways of teaching or helping your community, when you take that back to your community, who is traditional, the idea of Western knowledge, you're also you're also continuing that colonization idea of trying to change your people. So that Western knowledge you learn from college, you're taking it back home, you're part of that colonization that continues to happen every single day. So then again, it's something that we have to really acknowledge, colonization. We still all do it today. Our way of teaching, our way of knowledge, our knowledge that we all live, we're all supposed to be heterosexual, we're all supposed to be male and female. That's where the idea of heteronormative comes from. We all believe that men should be with women, women should be with men. That's where the concept of heteronormativity comes from. Cisgender, that idea is that all people are, they're all male, they're all female, they're not transgender, they don't cross over, there's no gender affirming surgeries, whatnot, there's none of that. It's all people are. And that's what the gender quota is. Like, all people should be male, all people should be women. And that's why I refuse to have any kind of surgery, because to me, that is a colonized concept as a trans person, that we have to move ourselves from one box and put ourselves in another box. So me going from male to female, and then when I put myself in that box there, I have to get all these surgeries. I need to get breast implants. I need to get my gender affirming surgery. I need to grow my hair out. I need to be a certain way. Those are all colonized concepts, colonized ideas. And so again, colonization has a huge impact as who we are today, and it continues to have a huge impact on who we are today. And so, moving forward, transgender is an umbrella term. It encompasses all who do not who. And so, trans is an umbrella term. It encompasses all who do not conform to the gender binary. Again, gender binary is male and female, and that's it. But no, a lot of us like to go against the grain. Like for myself, I go against the grain. I scream loud as like I can ever in my life. I scream it out loud and proud. I am a transgender woman. Because it goes against the norm. It goes against this heteronormativity, this hetero that everyone should be straight or everyone should be with the opposite sex. I scream loud and proud that I'm a native trans woman. And again, the gender identity is not a sexual orientation. These are things that you need to know. And also the fact that we as a transgender community, we're often overlooked, we're pushed aside, we're unreported, underreported, and told to please leave because of people's ignorance of not wanting to understand or wanting to accept us who we are as trans people. People see us as a phenomenon. Oh my gosh, what planet are you from? I'm not sure why people believe that. We're not no phenomenon. We've always been here. We've always been a part of our culture, especially when it comes to our indigenous stories. We have been a part of those stories. This is nothing new. This is nothing that came out of somewhere out of the woodworks. We've always been here. And again, you see here trans LGBTQ. I like to separate the T or the trans from the LGBTQ because trans again is a gender identity. LGBTQ are sexual orientations. So trans LGBTQ people encounter discrimination, stigmatization, and traumatic experiences of violence at disproportionately higher rates than heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. Because again, we're having to fight for our existence. We're having to fight to be at the table to do policy changes, because people like to make policy changes for us as trans people without the knowledge or education as what it is that transgender people need when it comes to healthcare and whatnot. So we're having to fight for our existence. We're having to fight to have a voice. And trans LGBTQ violence are motivated by intolerance, fear, or hatred of the person's diversity and attraction, gender identity, and or expression. Oops, sorry, typo. In every social context, in the homes, we're having to fight for existence. People don't want us to be the way we are. But some of us, we don't give a shit. Like, no, this is who I am. No, I'm not going to change. No. In the schools, I went to Wingate High School, which is a boarding school, and boy, did we have a rough time. But there was like 20 of us though in high school, and we fought, and we never were silenced. We screamed down the hallways, but people told us shut the fuck up, and we didn't. We got louder. We made ourselves exist in our school system. Our community the same way. Like people are trying to tell us, you need to get out of here. You have all of these stigmatized issues. Oh, you're probably an addict. Oh, you probably have HIV. Oh, you brought the white man disease here. Oh, you like this. You need to please leave. Again, we're always told to leave, even in our own communities, in our homes, in our schools. Religion and spiritual centers too, as well. We really have to, when it comes to spiritual centers, like we're going to ceremonies in our native cultures, we have to make an existence, because people our existence to come is being erased because of the whole idea of the Christian lens, that Christian concept, that Christian idea that no, man, there's only men and women. Men should be with women, women should be with men. That whole idea. So we have to make a statement by showing up as our true authentic selves. Public spaces as well as gender spaces, restrooms. I don't know why people love to police restrooms, which is it's just totally stupid. I go where if I'm gonna go, if the women's restroom is aligned to the women's restroom, I'm gonna go into the men's restroom. If the men's restroom is available, if not available, I go into the women's. I go wherever I need to go. Basically, when it comes to restrooms, we share restrooms at home with other people of the opposite sex. So public spaces and gender spaces are some places where also a lot of violence happen. Trans women have been beat up in women's restroom because they told, oh, you need to get out of here or I'm gonna call the cops. So public spaces are where most violence tend to happen, especially in our communities as well as in home, in our schools, and also in our health institutions. We have to advocate for ourselves when it comes to trans people. I was, for the longest time in my existence of taking hormones and seeing a doctor, I was teaching my doctor how to care for me, what blood work I needed to do, when I needed to do it, how often I needed to do it. I was teaching my doctor how to care for me, and no one should have to do that. Next slide, please. And these statistics here gives light to really what I had to overcome, as well as other trans people had to overcome. And so it gives light, because we live in a society where you have to have statistics to back up your claim, to back up whatever issues that was facing the community. We have to have the statistics. So here is the statistics. 23% of us are unemployed. That's 5 times the rate of the United States population, which is 5%. So basically 1 in 4. 41% of us are living in poverty, and we make less than $10,000 a year. That is 3 times the rate of the US population. 57% have experienced homelessness. I've experienced homelessness twice in my life. 59% said they would feel somewhat or very uncomfortable asking the police for help. I don't go to the police. I don't call the police for help. I've had some bad experiences with police officers. But they're also part of the problem, that we need to provide trainings like this, Transgender 101, to them, because they're in a headset that is only a heteronormative or cisgender. Anything outside of that, they could care less about. And here, 92% experience mistreatment in a K-12 school. I can definitely contest to that. I had mounts, rocks, snowballs thrown at me, and just the fear of having to run from the school building to the cafeteria just to get have lunch. And we would run in a batch. We would run in groups, and be screaming, "Ah!" Looking back now, it's a funny experience. But during that time, I think it really taught us what life, really prepared us for life. And so we learned to really defend ourselves from high school. And here, 50% had to teach the provider about their transgender people, about the providers about transgender people in order to get appropriate care. The access to adequate health care in the United States, especially here in New Mexico, was horrible. There are some places where, yeah, they'll give you great care, but that's usually in hub cities like Albuquerque. And here in Gallup, we have an awesome doctor who provides transgender care to Native trans women from all over the reservation. They come as far as Tuba City to see this doctor at the Gallup Indian Medical Center. Gallup Indian Medical Center is one of the places that is moving forward within the IHS agency. They're providing orchidectomy. They're providing these services that no other IHS is providing. They're the leading facility when it comes to transgender healthcare, because of one doctor, one person who made the change, who made a difference, who provided care for transgender people. It only takes one person to make a change. And that was that doctor there. Now you have other people who are there who are also trans and who are nurses, and they're providing services to transgender people. And 2% of us are living with HIV. When it comes to trans women of color as a whole, we're more likely to, because of the situation that we're forced into, living on the street, trying to me, providing. Can you get the baby? Sorry, I have the baby crawling underneath my desk. So when it comes to HIV, because we're forced into sex work. It's not a choice. We're forced into sex work because we have to find ways to make ends meet and to survive without a job. People don't want to hire us, so we're forced into sex work, and that's where a lot of trans women and trans women of color contract HIV. And then this last one here, 57% attempted suicide. That's the outrageous number, but really when it comes to a suicide attempt, where's the number for those who actually completed suicide? Where are they at? Where are their numbers? Where have they just been thrown out into the wind? Where are their numbers at? These are people who actually attempted, who tried, but survived. Where are those who have gone because of the suicide completion? When it comes to trans statistics, or even in New Mexico, I believe since 2013, New Mexico has been collecting statistics when it comes to trans people. So it's fairly new. Outside of New Mexico, I believe some places are still not collecting data when it comes to trans people, trans existence, trans healthcare, and whatnot. But the trans survey that happened in 2015, before that, that brought light to problems that we knew existed within the trans community. But again, we live in a society where statistics, you need to back up your claim. Where is the statistics? Where is the research behind that? So that statistics there, and here it is. And we definitely see it. We see this in every day in our lives. We're driving down Central somewhere, you see a trans woman who probably had to deal with all of this. It's there. It's really there. Next slide, please. Microphone time, Maddie.
If you could start wrapping it, is this the last slide?
I have this is this one and the next one. This is really a takeaway and what needs
Okay.
Okay. One more slide with this.
10 more minutes, yeah.
These are all right. Thank you. And these are takeaways. Change is really needed, and trans voices can only go so far. So as non-trans people, as allies, you can help push further the need for change. You can heighten our voices. You can provide spaces where our voices can be heard. And it starts with policy change. Stop making decisions for us as trans people. If you're not trans and you're making a decision on our behalf to make policy change, don't do that. You want trans person at the table. You want to hear their experience. You want to hear their voice. Even when it comes to the trans youth, you want to hear their voice because our experiences as adults and as youth are totally different. We can say, oh yes, when I was young, yeah, we experienced this. Oh no, times has changed. Time has changed. And these are some of the things that I believe should be taken into consideration when doing policy change or when making change. The first one, public policy and legislation need to ensure that gender-based violence are explicitly attentive to the heightened risk for transgender women, not only transgender women, but lesbian and bi women when it comes to Native population. Ensure that sufficient resources and effective mechanisms are in place to strengthen methods of reporting, responding to, and monitoring instances and rates of sexual violence against the trans LGBTQ people. Introduce mechanisms aimed at reporting to survivors of sexual violence in ways that avoid heteronormative and cisnormative assumptions. Because you see a trans woman, you believe that, oh, it's a gay person. Oh, they must be in a gay relationship. Or, oh, if they're male appearing, but they must be straight. These notions, these thoughts that you've been trained to think from a heteronormative idea, erase that. Educate the public and train agencies on the realities of violence within the trans community. Again, all the statistics that I went through, the personal experience that I talked about, let people know this is a population that is in dire need of help. Educate for effective and adequate health care and support for survivors of violence that meet the comprehensive needs. Again, no one should be having to teach their doctor how to care for them. Facilitate trauma-informed reporting procedures for trans LGBTQ that prioritize the safety and security of survivors. Again, when you meet a trans person, more than likely, they're probably suffering from trauma. Next slide, please. Train first responders, healthcare professionals, shelter and support services, and victim services on effective responses methods and mechanisms that skew the hetero and cisnormative assumptions regarding domestic and intimate partnership. Ensure gender identity and gender expressions are included in policy and procedures. Decriminalize sex work and conduct full and open consultation with sex work advocates to determine the most effective occupational safety measures for transgender women who engage in sex work. Again, we're not forced into sex work. We don't choose to be in sex work. We're forced into it. Differentiate sex work from trafficking and exploitative prostitution. Trans people identify as queer, straight, bi, gay, lesbian, asexual, pansexual, etc., just as non-trans people do. Trans LGBTQ issues are everyone's issues. Especially when it comes to our indigenous relatives, trans and LGBT issues are our issues, everyone's issue. We all carry more than one identity. Trans, non-trans, cisgender, gay, lesbian, bi, we all carry multiple identities. Transgender people have always been a part of the lesbian, gay, bisexual civil rights movement. In the traditional and Western view, we've always been making ways for people. We've brought our people back together again when we were separated, and that's what's told in our creation stories as Navajo people. So we've always been a part of the movement. Next slide, please. And also a few other things here. Don't ask about a transgender person's genitalia unless it has to do directly with the care or treatment they are seeking from you. Be willing to do your homework. Never deny a trans LGBTQ person services because of your personal beliefs. Advocate for cultural fluency when it comes to transgender people. Be aware that transgender people may have a name or other information on records that may be incongruent with appearances or preferred names and pronouns. Don't just add the T when it comes to policies. Make your organization transgender inclusive. Don't tokenize transgender people. Call out transphobic and homophobic remarks and jokes. Resist the urge to place others into a box. Gender stereotypes sucks for everyone. And when it comes to trans people in Albuquerque, we migrate. Summertime comes around, warm climates come around, we're migrating to the city. This is who we are. And really take into consideration cofactors that the trans person may have: substance use or abuse, homelessness, unemployment, just to name a few. And understand that generational historical trauma does exist within the trans community as well. And we're still continuously dealing with trauma every single day of our lives. And something I added, people who identify as trans are just like everyone else and want the same thing: to be loved, respected, and treated like any other human beings. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, quick 101, quick education tools. Thank you for all the recommendations, the highlights, the statistics. I put the in the chat, I put the information for the U.S. Trans Survey 2015. That's where some of the information that Renee had came from, and it's very alarming statistics. So really look into that. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Sheldon, for some of the knowledge that you gave to us, the information and stuff. So thank you all panelists who've been a part of this. The youth panel, you were great. You were wonderful. We really appreciate it. And from this time forward, I hope that the two populations that we discussed are going to be involved in the work that's being done with the task force and have seats at the table for some of us to be at. So I thank you very much for that. And Renee brought to light a lot of great information and education for our community and what needs to be done and stuff. So like Renee said, usually with Transgender 101, it's like a half a day to a whole day training that's condensed into a mini training. So you got the little gist of it, but things can be done in a greater context and discussed more. And with that's highlighted. But we are kind of running out of time. So we only have one more thing on the agenda before we close out and stuff. But I really wanted to thank all the participants for participating, listening to our panelists, our presenters, and taking that knowledge in. So please contact them or even contact me, get the resources. Let's have a dialogue. Let's get education provided. Let's be a part of it. And I'm happy to live in a state where laws, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but New Mexico has a hate crimes bill, a non-discrimination act. Documentation is kind of easier now for us to change our names on our driver's license, our birth certificates. We can have male, female, or X on our birth certificate. So that can be changed easily and stuff. So there are resources there for trans populations, people also who identify as non-binary and gender non-conforming. Transgender Resource Center is actually located in Albuquerque, but they are statewide. So you could utilize them for services also too if you need to get a hold of them. So I wanted to also thank Beata for letting me be a part of this and contacting me, and the task force for allowing me to be your moderator and get some important information from our groups that presented today. So, and then all the presenters and the panelists, thank you so much for all your knowledge and your words. So, and then now I'm going to turn it over for our closing, and our closing is going to be a traditional woman's honor / encouragement song by Vandy Crane, Oka Wakasa, and Swiftbird Drum. So I'll give it to you to close out our session. Thank you everybody for attending.
Dohe relatives, my name is Vandy Crane Swiftbird from the Osage Nation, and I'm with my daughter, of course, Tatonka Starwy Swiftbird, our daughter, and my husband, John Swiftbird from the Oglala Nation. And as Maddie mentioned, this is a traditional women's honoring song to honor all the women and all the courage and the strength that we bring to this world in all the different forms that we bring that feminine energy. And I also, just before we started, wanted to thank Beata for inviting us to the table as guests in your land. It's just a privilege and an honor to be down here, and very humbling to be a part of what you guys are doing, and also being able to support our relatives up north in doing similar work. So Wimina, thank you.
Thank you so much. Beata, do you have any words? We're done.
Just want to extend my extreme gratitude to all the panelists and presenters today, to Swiftbird Drum for that powerful closing and good medicine for everybody as we go forward in this work. And I just hope we can continue the dialogue and continue this networking with everyone on participating today. You know, this is one meeting of many that I hope to see happen. That I hope continues with the task force as we build on this knowledge and what we need to do moving forward, you know, either as a task force or within our communities. And just, yeah, just thank you so much to everybody. This is super informative and inspiring. Kunta.
Awesome. So presenters, if you could stay on because they want to get a photo op. So yeah,